Have you ever heard of a mask that dances on its own? This isn't just a story about ordinary magic. It's a tale of culture, mystery, and a promise that ties together the living and the spirit world. In today's story, we follow a young boy whose life changes forever after he discovers a magic mask hidden in the heart of an ancient forest. But the mask isn't just a relic, it's a symbol, and it's waiting to reveal its power. Stick around, because what happens next will leave you mesmerized, with lessons of respect, unity, and the unseen forces guiding our lives. Let's see what happens when the mask takes the lead. The mask that dances on its own. In a quiet village nestled among the rolling hills of Ireland, there was a legend that had been passed down through generations. The villagers often gathered around the great baobab tree to tell stories of their ancestors. But among all the tales, one story stood out: the mask that dances on its own. Everyone had heard the story, but no one had ever seen the mask dance until one fateful night. It was all began when a young boy named Kofi discovered an old dusty mask hidden deep in the village sacred shrine. Kofi had always been curious about the legend his grandmother told him, and the mask was said to hold the spirits of the great ancestors. But it wasn't just any mask. The mask was said to have magical powers. Kofi's heart raised as he stared at it, his fingers gently brushing its surface. The mask was unlike anything Kofi had ever seen. It was made of a smooth wood intricately carved with symbols of the sun, the moon, and the stars. The eyes of the mask gleamed with an eerie glow. Kofi could feel the mask's presence, as if it were watching him, waiting for something. He carefully picked it up, and as he held it in his hands, he whispered, "Who are you?" As soon as the words left Kofi's lips, a strange feeling washed over him. The air around him seemed to hum with energy, and the ground beneath his feet trembled. Kofi stepped back, his eyes wide in shock. The mask slowly lifted from his hands, floating into the air as though it had a mind of its own. The mask turned to face Kofi, and without warning, it began to move. The once lifeless wooden mask started to sway from side to side, as if it was dancing. Kofi stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hardly believe his eyes. Mask twirled, spin, and move with a grace he had never imagined possible. "It's the spirit of the ancestors," a voice whispered behind him. Kofi spinned around to see his grandmother standing at the entrance of the shrine. Her face was serious, yet filled with a sense of wonder. The mask chooses its dancer, she said softly, but it only dances when it senses a pure heart, one that respects the old ways. Kofi felt a mix of fear and excitement. "What do you mean, Grandma?" he asked, his voice trembling. His grandmother smiled kindly and motioned for him to sit beside her. Long ago, she began, our ancestors created marks to honor the spirit that protects our village. But only those with pure intentions will see the marks come to life. Kofi listened intently as his grandmother spoke of the ancient rituals and dances that had once taken place in the village. The marks is not just an object, she explained. It is a vessel for the spirit of the ancestors. They dance to remind us of the importance of unity, respect, and the harmony between nature and humankind. That night, as the moonlight bathes the village in its silvery glow, Kofi decided to take the marks to the village square. The villagers had gathered for their evening gathering, and Kofi felt the pull of the marks' magic. The time had come to see if the legend was true. As Kofi approached the square, he held the marks in his hands, feeling the vibrations of its power. The villagers who had been chatting and laughing suddenly grew silent. Their eyes turned towards him, sensing the energy that surrounded him. Kofi could hear his heartbeat in his ears as he stood in the center of the square. Without any warning, the mask flew from his hands and landed on the ground in front of him. It lay still for a moment, and then, just like before, it began to dance. The villagers gasped in fear, their mouths open in disbelief. They had heard the story, but seeing the mask dance in front of them was something beyond their wildest dream. The mask moved faster and faster, its wooden lips twisting and turning in ways that no one thought possible. It seems to move to a rhymes only it could hear. The villagers began to murmur, their voices filled with fear and wonder. Kofi's heart swelled with pride, but deep down he knew that this moment wasn't just about the mass. It is about the village, the ancestors, and the power of unity. As the mass danced, Kofi realized that the dance wasn't just for entertainment. It is for a message. The mask was telling the villagers that they needed to come together to respect the traditions of their ancestors and to protect their land. The spirit of the ancestors was not just a symbol, but a guide to living a life filled with love, respect, and balance. The elders who had watched in silence began to nod in agreement. They understood the message. The mask dances to show us the way. The elder said, it reminds us that we must never forget our roots. Our ancestors gave us the knowledge to live in harmony and nature, and it is our duty to pass it on. Kofi felt a deep sense of responsibility. The mask was not just a relic of the past. It was a living connection to the ancestors. He vowed to keep the traditions alive, to protect the village, and to share the lessons he had learned with others. As the mask continued to dance, the villagers began to join. They circled around the mask, clapping their hands and stamping their feet. The energy in the air grew stronger, and soon the entire village was dancing in unison. It was as if the spirit of the ancestors had come alive in them, guiding their every move. Kofi's grandmother stood at the edge of the circle, watching with tears in her eyes. She had lived her life honoring the old ways, but she had never witnessed a moment like this before. She whispered a prayer of thanks to the ancestors, knowing that their presence was more real than ever. The night was filled with laughter, joy, and a deep sense of belonging. As the masks continued to move, Kofi felt a surge of emotions. He realized that the mask was not just a tool for magic, it was a symbol of the village's strength and resilience. The dance was a celebration of their culture, their unity, and their shared history. But as the night wore on, the mask slowly began to slow its movements. The villagers, still caught in the rhyme, didn't notice at first. Kofi, however, watched carefully. He knew that the mask had done its job. It had delivered its message, and now it was time for the spirit to rest. The mask came to a gentle stop, lying still on the ground. The villagers, out of breath but smiling, stopped dancing and gathered around it. The spirit is pleased, Kofi's grandmother said softly. We must now honor it with our action. From that day on, the villagers changed. The people worked together more closely, respecting the land and each other. They held festival to honor their ancestors, and the mask was displayed in the village center as a reminder of their unity. Kofi became an elder in his community, sharing the lessons of the mask and the importance of living in harmony with nature. Years passed, and Kofi grew older. The mask thought still revered, no longer danced on its own, but every time Kofi held it in his hand, he could feel the spirits of the ancestors guiding him, reminding him of the lessons it had taught him. One day, Kofi took his children to the village square. He placed the marks on the grounds and began to tell them the stories of that magical night. This marks, he said, represents the strength of our people. It reminds us that we must always respect our traditions, honor our elders, and care for the land that sustains us. As Kofi spoke, his children listened intently. Their eyes welled with wonder. They could feel the weight of the story, the importance of the marks, and the legacy of their ancestors. The marks became more than just a symbol. It became a living part of the village soul, a constant reminder of the power of unity, respect, and tradition. The spirit of the ancestors danced on in the hearts of the villagers, guiding them through the challenges of life. Kofi's children grew up, and they too carried the message of the marks with them. They became elders, teachers, and protectors of the land, always remembering the lessons they had learned from their father and their ancestors. As time passed, the villagers flourished. The crops grew bountifully. The rivers flowed with clear water, and the people lived in harmony with nature. The mask, though silent, continued to watch over them. its presence felt in every tree, every stone, and every smile. The villagers knew that the masks would never truly stop dancing. Its spirit was alive in the way they lived, in the way they treated each other, and in the way they honored the land. It was a dance that would never end, a dance of life, love, and unity. And so the legends of the masks that dances on its own lived on, not just a story, but as a way of life. It was a reminder that the greatest magic was not in the mask itself, but in the hearts of the people who chose to live by its teachings. Kofi, now an elder himself, sat beneath the baobab tree, watching the children of the village play. He smiled, knowing that the spirit of the ancestors would always be with them, guiding them, dancing with them forever.